If you recall, in week 4, I was challenged by a quilting friend to do a certain technique. Curve. Doggone it. Yep. Curve. 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 Girl, you have fallen out of the cradle and bopped you upside your head. One subscriber commented, "You handled those curves like a pro, Eric. See? Nothing to fear. Glad your friend pushed you into it. Now, it's my turn. I challenge you to do a cube with Y-seams. I promise, just like simple, gentle curves, there's nothing to fear of Y-seams. They're not complicated at all and require no special tools or talents. You can do it." Well, thanks for the vote of confidence, Kelly, but I stalled on this one up until now. And since we're down to our last block, it's now or never. So challenge finally accepted. We're not doing a cube, but we are doing a ton of Y-seams. Let's get started. Our final block will be the Lemoyne Star, also known as the 8-point star. This video ended up being over an hour long, so instead of creating that long of a video, I broke it down into 2 parts. In part 1, I'll tell you about the fabric requirements, and we'll get started sewing some of our diamond shapes. I will give you a few pointers that have helped me out in sewing this block together. In part 2, we finish the block by sewing our inset pieces and trimming down the block. We got a lot to do, so let's get started by talking fabrics. So to make this block, well, let's get into our fabric requirements here. Now I'm going to use 2.5-inch strips here. And these are what I'm going to cut my diamond shapes out from. Now, these 2.5-inch strips, well, both of them were cut the full length of the width of the fabric. You're probably not going to need the entire width of the fabric. You could probably get away with maybe even doing 1/4 or 1/3 of it. But the length or how long the strip has to be will just depends upon how many different fabrics you're going to incorporate into your block. What do I mean by that? Well, here I just have these 2 prints. But if you want to, you could incorporate more, maybe do 3 or 4. Or if you want to, you could just do 1 solid print. That's up to you. But the more fabrics or the more strips you use, the less the length has to be. Okay, but for me, I'm just going to use these 2 prints here. Again, these are both 2.5 inches. And we're going to need to cut 8 diamond shapes from these 2 fabrics. So 4 of this and 4 from this. In addition to that, here I have 1 7-inch square of a background. So what we're going to do with this 7-inch square is we're going to cut it both ways on the diagonal. And these will become the set-in seam, or the set-in triangle, I should say. Then finally, we have 4 3.5-inch squares, and these will go into the corners of the block. So let's get to cutting. So I'm going to take the rest of these fabrics, put them on the side for now. And let's just start with our big 7-inch square here. And we'll get the smaller cutting mat here. So I'm just going to lay my ruler from corner to corner. And we're just going to cut it diagonally that way. And I'm going to rotate it. And we'll cut it again from corner to corner diagonally. Okay. And what we're going to end up with is 4 triangles now. These triangles, They're called set-in triangles, in which if you ever done a block or a quilt that's on point, you'll usually use these to kind of make up for the on the sides, to make up for that gap that's going to occur. So we'll put these triangles to the side for now. Okay, so now we need to cut our diamond shapes from our 2.5 inch strips. Now, you're going to need mirror images of the diamond shapes. If I were to just lay these fabrics right side up and just start cutting, well, one of the fabrics is going to be on the grain. The other, or the mirror image of that, it's going to be on the bias. And so if you are a person that loves to stretch their fabric like me, that's going to present a problem. Here's what you can do. Okay, so I'm going to put my fabrics wrong sides together. Okay. What I'm looking for on my ruler is this 45-degree line. So I'm taking my 45-degree line that's on the ruler, matching it to the edge of the bottom of the strip. And I'm just going to make my first cut just to start to get that angle. Oh, wait, let me flip it back over. Okay, line up the fabrics again. Looking for that 45-degree line here on the ruler. Now, because these strips are were cut at 2.5 inches wide, I'm going to line up again the 45-degree line from the ruler. Now, this angle here, I'm going to match that to the 2.5-inch line that's also on the ruler. Just to repeat myself, I put the 45-degree line from the ruler on the bottom edge of the fabric. I'm also lining up the edge, or this edge here, on the 2.5-inch line on the ruler. Then I can cut it. And I got my first diamond shape, or first 2 diamond shapes. Now, typically what I do see people do is they will put both strips right sides up and they will just start cutting their diamonds. But when they do that, one of these diamonds is going to be cut on a bias. So when you sew it together, you could be stretching out your fabrics. Instead, if you want to keep the fabrics, or both of those diamond shapes, on the grain, just put your strips wrong sides together and just cut 2 at a time in this manner. Again, we're going to need a total of 8 diamond shapes. So here I go. That's 2. Here's 4. Here is 6. And then last 2. Here is 8. Now, just for practice, if this is the first time you're making or doing anything with a Y seam, you might want to cut a few extra diamonds just in case you make, shall we say, I don't want to call it a mistake. What should we call it? A boo-boo? Hey, boo-boo. Practice. Yeah, practice diamonds. Because we have all this extra fabric, I could cut a few more. In fact, I'm just going to cut 4 more extra just to practice this. So here we got our diamond shapes. I cut a total of 12. I'm only going to need 8 of them. So I have 4 to just practice with. You only need 8 to make this block, but I just cut some extra because I'm not very good with Y seams. I do find that this does help in putting this block together. Essentially what we're going to be doing is we're going to be laying out the block, or I'm going to alternate each one of these colors where it's a red and this pink. And there's another red. Then we'll go with the pink. So we're going to start sewing these diamonds to kind of formulate our star. But here's the tricky part. At each of these particular intersections here, we're not going to sew it all the way to that point here. We're going to actually stop a 1/4 inch away from there. Now, if you can eyeball your 1/4 inch pretty accurately, then you don't need to do this step. However, I'm not one of those people. In fact, because I'm not very confident in Y seams or sewing Y seams, yeah, I found it helpful, for me at least, to mark where that 1/4 inch is on the back of these diamonds. So what I'm going to do is I got my marking tool here, and on these two corners, both on the left and the right, I'm just going to take my ruler, measure it a 1/4 inch in from the side here. I'm going to make a mark. Then on the upper angle here, I'm going to make another, measure it a 1/4 inch in from the edge of the fabric. And we're going to make another mark, and we're going to create this X here. Now, as the old saying goes, X marks the spot. So this point here is where we're going to be stopping our stitch line, or stopping the seam. You'll see what I mean when we start sewing. So I'm going to flip this over, do the same thing to the other corner here. Okay. There we go. And I'm going to do that for the rest of these diamonds and continue on. I'm also going to do that to these squares. Now, again, each one of these squares is going to get sewn into the 4 corners. So on one end of the square, I'm going to do the same thing, where I'm going to measure 1/4 inch in, make one mark here, then I'm going to also measure a 1/4 inch in from this side and make that same mark. Okay, I don't need to do it on all 4 corners, just pick one corner. We'll do the 1/4 inch mark on the rest of these diamonds a little later. We got our squares done, and I'll put these to the side. For these triangles, these are the set-in triangles. Turning it over onto the back, we're going to do the same thing as we've done to the diamonds as well as the squares. The point that we are going to mark, or where we are going to mark the 1/4 inch, is actually at the top of the triangle. So I will measure a 1/4 inch in from here, make my mark. Then on the opposing side, measure a 1/4 inch here, make my mark. So I'm going to go ahead and do the markings on the rest of the diamonds and the triangles, and we'll start sewing. So on all of my pieces, I marked the 1/4 inch boundary with this X. So on the squares, again, it's in one of the corners. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the upper left corner. On the diamond shapes, it's on the left and the right side here. And then on the triangle, it's at the very top. So again, just measured a 1/4 inch in, marked one line, and then on the opposite side, mark the line there. X marks the spot. That's what I'm going to refer to as my 1/4 inch stop, or 1/4 inch boundary, maybe I should say. Now we're going to start sewing, and we're going to actually start with our diamond shapes here. I'm going to put the left diamond, or the red diamond, on the left and put it right sides together with the pink. We'll take this to the sewing machine. And here is why I needed to mark that 1/4 inch, or do that 1/4 inch marking, because we're not going to start sewing from the very edge here. In fact, I'm going to just put the needle down right on that X, or that center of the X. That's where I'm going to put the needle down. Then I'm going to just start a few stitches. Then I'm going to back stitch or lock stitch it, but I do not want to go past that center X mark there. I'm just going to go right up to it. Then we'll stitch it all the way down. So let's do that on this one. So I'm just placing the needle, or manually putting the needle down right on that X mark. I'm going to sew forward a few stitches. Okay, that was 3. Then I'm going to reverse 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. Then we go all the way forward, right off. Okay. Take the next 2 diamonds and do the same thing. Line it up first of all. I move the camera a little bit so to give you a little bit of a better angle, so you can see what I am doing here. So again, I'm just going to place the needle, just kind of manually putting it so that the center where the needle goes down right on where the X is, which is right about there. Okay. Then lining up the fabrics a little better. Then I'm going to sew forward a few stitches, go back stitch, and then we sew right off. Then we got the last 2 diamonds. And I'm just going to use the hand wheel to this, and then we're going to come right down on that X. So a few stitches forward, back, just to lock stitch it and secure it, and go all the way down. And we're going to continue with the rest of these. Okay, so here we have all of our diamonds sewn together and chain stitched. And we're just going to separate them off. Now all of these, eventually I'm going to press all the seam allowances over in one direction, but I'm not going to do that just yet. Instead, what I will do is, now we got them sewn in pairs. Now we're going to start sewing the pairs together. I just want these 2 to go, and again, just being aware that the colors are going to alternate. And we're going to do basically the same thing. So I'm going to take these to the sewing machine. I'm going to start from that X, or from that spot there. We're going to sew it and just basically do the same thing, where we're going to put the needle, start it right there, take a few stitches forward, then back stitch, and then sew it all the way down. Now I choose to start from where the X is, or where that 1/4 inch boundary is. I just found it easier for me to do it this way. A lot of other people will start from the edge here and sew towards that 1/4 inch boundary. For me, that didn't work, but if you're comfortable with doing it using that technique, by all means, go ahead and do it. What I'm also going to look at, though, is when I line up my fabrics, of course, I want to line it up, putting the edges together, but I'm also going to use the dog ears here to line up the fabric, making sure that at least that the dog ears are also kind of lining up there. And to secure it down, put a pin in it. I'm more comfortable with having to watch the edge of the fabric on the right side, but if I put it on the right side, I'm going to be sewing on this edge here, and I need to sew on this edge here. So instead, I'm actually going to flip this around. Now I know the camera cannot pick this up because the fabric is so dark, but I did mark my X boundary or my 1/4 inch boundary there. So I do have it marked. So I'm actually going to sew from this side. Just line up the fabrics a little better. And I'm going to put a pin so that it doesn't shift on me. And we're going to line from, or we're going to start sewing from here, go all the way down. And I should put a pin here at the bottom as well to make sure that I'm not going to be sewing on something that I should not be sewing on. Let's go to the sewing machine. Okay. So much like what we've already been doing, again, I'm going to put that needle down right where the X is, or at the center of where the X mark is. And it's right there. Got it. Just like before, we'll take a couple stitches forward. Back stitch, and then I can start sewing all the way down. And same thing with this other one. Okay, so again, gonna line up my fabric, lining up my 2 edges there, and then the dog ears are yeah, that looks pretty good. So I'm gonna put a pin right here. Okay. Now, as I'm sewing, if I have my accurate 1/4 inch, then when I get to this bottom, I should, or the stitch line should come out right here somewhere. Now, I see that I didn't do a very good job lining up the diamonds the first time around. So notice that I do have this pink sticking out, but I'm not going to worry about that so much at this point. I'm just going to reinsert my pin there. But again, I should come out when I sew my seam, I should come very close to where this diamond meets up with this edge of the diamond here. So somewhere around there. If I come close to that, then I know I got a pretty good 1/4 inch seam in. So now I got my 2 pieces here. Eventually, this is what the entire block should look like. It'll look a lot better when it's all nicely sewn, trust me. Okay. Now at this point, we can either choose to sew these 2 halves together, but you know, I found it a lot easier when I started to sew the square pieces and this triangle piece onto each side of the block and then sew the 2 halves together. Play around with that. You might find it easier to actually just sew the star together and then sew all of these other pieces. But for some reason, I found it easier to actually put in all these other inset pieces and then leave these 2 triangles so that at the very end, once we get the 2 halves together, sewn together. So, well, I'll leave it up to your choice as to how you want to tackle it. I did not do any seam pressing. I didn't even finger press it yet at this point because, well, I also found out that anytime I press the seam one way or the other, eventually I am going to press all the seams in one direction. But at this point, it became a bit of an obstacle when I press the seam, even if I finger press the seam, because of the fact that I need to get access into this area here where the 2 seams meet, or where that 1/4 inch boundary is. And so I just found it easier to just not press any of the seams, not even finger press it, just leave it as it is. And then when we get the entire block sewn, or when we start sewing some of these inset pieces, like the squares, that's when I can start pressing it, or at least finger pressing my seam. just water this time, guys. And got a new jug too. Yep. No magic elixir today. Now, it's no big secret that Y seams, or sewing inset seams as some people call it, yeah, it's not my favorite thing to do when it comes to quilting techniques or quilting, what's the word? You know what I mean. I mean, there are certain techniques within quilting and certain types of things within quilting that I do like to do. I do like to applique. I do like to long arm, although I haven't done that in a long time, so maybe I should start firing up my long arm. I know some people who love to free motion quilt, but when it comes to Y seams or inset seams, it's not my favorite thing. Well, I'm not sure quite exactly why it's not. Maybe it's just because it's so time consuming to do, and oftentimes it can be very difficult to do as well if you don't do it right, or if you don't find your own technique as to how to do it. Again, there's a lot of different styles, a lot of different techniques as to how you can do a Y seam, how you can do your quilting, how you can do applique. So it kind of got me thinking, and that's this week's question of the Sewing Side Chat. What are your favorite quilting techniques? Do you like applique? Do you like hand stitching? I don't. Do you like to free motion quilt, or are you a walking foot person, or maybe you're just a stitch in a ditch type of quilter? Tell me, what's your favorite quilting technique or quilting style, and what's your least favorite? Do you like doing inset seams or Y seams? Definitely not me. Is there anybody out there in the Treasure Heart Creations world that is very comfortable, and even, in fact, maybe you like doing Y seams or inset seams? I'm curious to know what your technique in doing it is. So put a comment down below. Let me know and let everybody know, hey, is there really a better way to do Y seams? I'd be interested to know this one. I just do it this way because it worked for me. And me being an inexperienced Y seamstress, is that even a word? Me being an inexperienced person dealing with Y seams, I mean, up until now I've been avoiding them, but yeah, because Kelly A challenged me, I could not walk away from the challenge. Took me a whole year almost, finally got it done. With a little practice, of course. Again, if there's anybody out there in the Treasure Heart Creations world where Y seams are a breeze for you, put a comment down below. Let me know what is your technique and share it with everybody. If there's an easier way, hey, I'd like to know. I don't know. Y seams, well, this block definitely hasn't changed my mind about it. Nope. Although I'm confident now I know how to do it and that I can do it. But do I love doing it? No. In fact, if there ever is a block with a Y seam, I will split it up into half square triangles and call it a day. I'll bet there's a ton of you that also do the same thing. Don't lie, because you know who you are. Let me lay it all out again, except I'm going to leave that triangle out, put this triangle in, put this triangle in, put the square there, and the square there. So these two triangles go right here. We're not going to sew those two in until we get all of these pieces sewn. Then when we're ready to, or after we sew the two halves together, that's when we can put these two in. So we are halfway done with making this block. In part 2, we will focus on sewing our inset pieces, the triangles and the squares. We will sew the two halves together, then square up our block. And don't worry, There are a lot more why seems to come. Now see you in part 2. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications on when I upload the next video. Put a comment down below saying what you liked or maybe even what you didn't like. And join the Facebook discussion group at Treasure Heart Creations. You can post pictures of the blocks that you created or just scroll through and gather inspiration from other Treasure Heart Creation group members. And from time to time, there are giveaways exclusively for Treasure Heart Creation group members. So use the link in the description box below to sign up. If you're on Instagram, post pictures of the blocks that you're working on using the hashtag THC5252. Well, that's it for now. Now go out and create something.